Imagine two boys vanishing into a forest, their laughter silenced by a storm gone without a trace. 15 years later, loggers uncover a buried metal tomb, and the horrifying truth inside will haunt you forever. Hey, don't forget to like, please subscribe for more shocking crime stories, and hit the bell icon. The darkest truth are yet to come. July 17th, 1997, was one of those sticky summer days in Coldwater, Michigan, where the air clung to your skin like a second shirt. The Blackthorn State Forest loomed beyond the town, a sprawling maze of pines and shadows that seemed to breathe secrets. Ethan Morrow, 14, and his younger brother, Caleb, 12, were last seen that afternoon, their Boy Scout uniforms crisp against the green, heading toward a troop meeting deep in the forest. A vicious storm rolled in hours later, tearing through the trees with a fury that swallowed hope. Everyone thought the brothers were lost to nature's wrath until 2012, when a logger's blade struck a rusted metal container buried in the earth, revealing a darkness far worse than any storm. The Blackthorn Forest wasn't just big, it was alive, in a way that made your skin prickle. Its 30 acres of dense pines, jagged ravines, and twisting creeks could disorient even the locals. The Morrow family lived in a weathered clapboard house on its edge, where the forest's whispers crept through the windows at night. Ethan was the bold one, with a crooked grin and a knack for rallying his scout troop, always the first to scale a ridge or start a fire. Caleb was quieter, his sharp eyes catching details: a deer's track, a bent fern that others overlooked. He carried a small leather notebook everywhere, sketching plants or jotting notes about their adventures. Together, they were unstoppable, bound by a love for the wild that pulsed like a heartbeat. Their mother, Laura, used to say they were born with dirt under their nails and the forest in their souls. That morning, the boys left home at 10 a.m., their backpacks bouncing as they waved goodbye. Laura watched from the porch, her coffee mug warm in her hands, unaware it was the last time she'd see them whole. The scout meeting was routine, held in a clearing a mile into Blackthorn, where the troop practiced knots and planned a fall campout. By 4 p.m., Laura expected their voices, Ethan's loud jokes, Caleb's soft questions filling the house. But the clock ticked to 5, and the silence was deafening. Outside, the sky churned, turning a sickly gray that swallowed the sun. I stumbled across this case in a dusty library archive years ago, and it's haunted me since. How a single hour can shatter a family's world. By 6 p.m., the wind was a living thing, rattling the windows and bending the pines like blades of grass. Laura's stomach knotted as she dialed David, her husband, at his hardware store. "They're not back," she said, her voice barely steady. David suggested they might be at a friend's, but his tone betrayed his worry. The forecast had warned of rain, but this was no sprinkle. It was a beast, with gusts that shook the house and a metallic tang in the air. They called the scoutmaster, Tom Hargrove, who said the meeting ended at 3:30 p.m. He'd snapped a photo that day, Ethan and Caleb standing shoulder to shoulder, their wide-brimmed hats tilted against the rising wind. No one had seen them after the troop scattered. Imagine standing in your kitchen, the storm screaming outside, knowing your kids are out there. Would you cling to hope or let fear take over? Laura and David chose to fight, calling the Coldwater Sheriff's Department to report Ethan and Caleb missing. The words felt like a blade, cutting their world apart. Deputies arrived, their cruiser lights pulsing through the deluge, but the storm was a wall, 60-mile-an-hour winds, zero visibility, and rain that stung like needles. Searching was suicide. The forest was a black void, swallowing sound and light. Deputies huddled with the Morrows, piecing together a timeline. They called other scout parents, but no one had answers. The boys had vanished. A breakthrough came from Ryan Kessler, Ethan's best friend and a fellow scout. In a trembling voice, he told deputies the brothers hadn't planned to head home. Days earlier, they'd found a hidden hollow, a shallow cave beneath a granite outcrop, tucked in a remote corner of Blackthorn. They called it their fort, a secret they shared with Ryan. After the meeting, Ethan wanted to explore it further, his eyes bright with excitement. Caleb, clutching his notebook, agreed. Ryan had noticed the sky darkening, the air growing heavy, and begged them to turn back. "It's just a quick look," Ethan said, his grin defiant. Caleb followed, as always. Ryan watched them disappear into the trees, their uniforms blending with the green, while the rest of the troop headed to the parking lot. The hollow was miles from the clearing, in a rugged, unmapped part of the forest. If the boys were there when the storm hit, they'd have faced a nightmare: flooded trails, falling branches, and darkness that turned the forest into a trap. Deputies theorized they might have sought shelter in the hollow, or been swept away by a flash flood. But the storm made searching impossible. Laura and David sat by the phone, the wind's howl a cruel reminder of their son's exposure. Laura clutched Ethan's spare scout scarf, her fingers tracing its stitching, as if it could pull them back. The night stretched on, endless and merciless, each gust tightening the knot in their chests. At dawn on July 18th, the storm eased and a massive search launched. Sheriff's deputies, state troopers, park rangers, and over 200 volunteers flooded the trailhead. The forest was a war zone: uprooted trees, mud-choked paths, and creeks swollen into rivers. The air was thick with damp rot, and every step was a battle against the sucking mud. Ryan, barely 14, guided a team toward the hollow, his face pale but resolute. The terrain was brutal, all jagged rocks and tangled roots, made worse by the storm's wreckage. "Searchers," shouted Ethan and Caleb's names, their voices swallowed by the trees. They used ropes to cross raging creeks and dogs to sniff for traces, driven by a desperate hope that the boys were alive. The first day yielded nothing. Volunteers, soaked and bone-tired, refused to quit. Laura and David joined them, their eyes scanning every shadow, their voices hoarse from calling. On July 19th, a ranger team found the hollow, a low, cave-like dip beneath a granite slab, half buried by a mudslide. The site was a gut punch. The entrance was choked with debris, and the surrounding ravine showed signs of violent flooding watermarks high on the rocks, branches jammed in crevices. Inside, the air was cold and heavy, the floor slick with silt. No footprints, no gear, just a suffocating emptiness. Then, a searcher spotted a braided leather cord caught in a root near the entrance, tied in a perfect square knot. Ryan's eyes widened. "That's Ethan's," he whispered. "He made it for a merit badge." The knot was fresh, untouched by the storm's chaos. The knot was proof the boys had reached the hollow, likely just as the storm peaked. But what happened next? The hollow's walls bore high watermarks, evidence of a flash flood roaring through. Deputies theorized the boys were trapped inside, overwhelmed by water, or fled and got lost in the storm's fury. The search widened, with divers scouring creeks and 9 units combing the forest. Laura held the cord, her hands shaking, as if it were a lifeline to her sons. Weeks dragged on. The media circus faded, volunteers dwindled, and the forest kept its secrets. The case went cold, labeled a tragic accident. The Morrows held a memorial without bodies, their grief a raw, open wound. Laura kept Caleb's notebook on her nightstand, its blank pages a silent scream. 15 years later, in October 2012, Blackthorn Forest faced a new invasion. Economic strain forced the state to open remote sections for logging, areas untouched since the 90s. On October 14th, logger Nate Carver was running a skidder in a dense, isolated tract miles beyond the 1,997 search zone. The forest hummed with chainsaws and the growl of machinery, a stark contrast to its usual silence. Around 2 p.m., Nate's blade hit something with a sharp, metallic clang, not the thud of a rock or the give of a root. He stopped, heart pounding, and climbed down. Beneath a layer of dirt, pine needles, and moss, was a rusted metal edge, deliberately concealed. Nate called his crew, and they uncovered a heavy steel hatch, set flush with the ground, like a door to the underworld. The find was wrong, too intentional, too hidden. This part of Blackthorn was a no-man's land, far from any trail or road. Why was this here? The crew argued about covering it up. Logging was behind, and reporting it meant delays that could cost them. But Nate, a father with kids Ethan's age, felt a chill he couldn't ignore. Imagine finding something like that, buried where no one goes. Would you walk away or dig deeper? Nate chose the truth, driving 12 miles to get a cell signal and calling the sheriff. Deputies arrived at dusk, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. They pried open the hatch, revealing a black void. A stale, sour smell hit them: decay, rust, and something worse. It was a shipping container, 30 feet long, buried like a grave. Inside was a horror show. 2 moldy mattresses, stained and crumbling, scattered food wrappers from brands popular in the late 90s, a rusted flashlight, and a stack of comic books. Their pages curled and faded, titles like Spider-Man and X-Men, relics of a 97 childhood. The air was thick, hard to breathe, and the walls were coated in rust and grime. A deputy's light caught something else: a small leather notebook, its cover etched with Caleb M. Inside were detailed sketches of Blackthorn's plants and trails, Caleb's handwriting neat and precise. The final page held a scrawled note: "He's watching us. We're not alone." The words were a blade slicing through the silence. This wasn't a Storm's doing. The Morrow brothers had been taken, held, in this buried prison. By who? And where were they now? The notebook was bagged, and the site became a crime scene. The sheriff called the FBI, knowing Coldwater couldn't handle this. The forest had guarded its secret for 15 years. But the truth was breaking free. The container wasn't just a hiding place. It was a cage, built with chilling precision. Who could craft such a nightmare? And what became of Ethan and Caleb after that desperate note? Caleb's note wasn't just a cry for help. It was proof of a predator who'd planned this for years. As the FBI digs deeper, a trail of chilling clues points to a monster hiding in plain sight. And the fate of the Morrow brothers hangs on one question: is one of them still out there? Caleb's frantic note, "He's watching us. We're not alone," wasn't just a cry from 1997. It was a scream across 15 years, proof that the Morrow brothers' disappearance was no accident. The buried shipping container, uncovered by loggers in Blackthorn State Forest in October 2012, wasn't a Storm's casualty, but a predator's cage, built with chilling precision to hold Ethan and Caleb captive. The FBI had descended on Coldwater, Michigan, transforming the remote logging site into a hive of activity agents in dark jackets, the hum of generators, and the weight of a reopened wound. Who could orchestrate such a calculated horror? And what happened to the boys after those desperate words were scratched into Caleb's notebook? The truth was closer than anyone dared imagine, hiding in plain sight. The container itself was a puzzle, a 30-foot steel tomb buried deep in the earth, its rusted walls whispering of long-held secrets. FBI agents crawled over it, Alina, noting its modifications: a reinforced hatch with triple locks, a hidden ventilation system of industrial-grade ducts snaking through the forest floor. This wasn't a makeshift hideout. It was a prison, designed for long-term captivity. The ventilation system was the key, custom-built with specialized fans and HEPA filters, the kind used in hospitals or factories, not something a random hunter could cobble together. This pointed to a perpetrator with technical expertise and access to rare equipment. The comic books, food wrappers, and Caleb's notebook, etched with his terrified words, suggested the boys had lived there, possibly for years. The thought was unbearable. Imagine being a parent, learning your children weren't swept away by a storm but stolen, kept alive in a buried cage. It's the kind of truth that breaks you. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, was called in, their profiles painting a grim picture. A solitary predator, meticulous and patient, with a deep knowledge of the forest and the means to bury a container undetected. The storm of July 17, 1997, hadn't caused the boy's disappearance. It had been a perfect cover, masking the abductor's tracks in the chaos. The investigation shifted to the container's origins. The ventilation system's components were traced to a manufacturer who provided records of regional distributors from the mid-90s. Most records were gone, but one company's microfilm archives revealed a cash purchase of 2 high-grade fans and filters in April 1997, 3 months before the boys vanished. The buyer, Leonard Voss, a name that meant nothing yet. Voss was a ghost in Coldwater's records, but a background check lit up like a flare. In 1997, Leonard Voss was a 42-year-old HVAC technician, a loner who ran a small repair business. He'd worked contracts for the state, servicing utility stations near Blackthorn, giving him access to the forest and heavy equipment. His utility van, loaded with tools, could move unnoticed through the wilderness. A deeper dig revealed a disturbing past. In 1993, Voss had volunteered briefly with a Boy Scout troop in a nearby county, only to be quietly dismissed after parents reported uncomfortable behavior toward boys, lingering touches, private offers of camping trips. No charges were filed, but the pattern was clear. The BAU's profile matched perfectly. A predator with technical skills, forest access, and a chilling fixation on young boys. The FBI placed Voss under surveillance in his small, isolated house on Coldwater's outskirts. He was in his late 50s now, still running his HVAC business, his life a study in routine early mornings in his workshop. Few visitors, no family. His meticulous nature was evident in his spotless home, every tool in its place. Agents noted his calm demeanor, but something about his solitude felt wrong, like a man hiding from the world. A search warrant was secured, and on October 20, 2012, a tactical team raided his property at dawn. Voss was in his kitchen, sipping coffee, when agents stormed in. He didn't resist, his face a mask of quiet surprise, as if he'd been expecting this day. The search was methodical. The house was sparse, almost sterile, with no personal touches, no photos, no mementos. But the workshop was a goldmine. Hidden in a locked safe were blueprints for a buried shipping container, complete with a ventilation system identical to the one found. The schematics were precise, detailing measurements, materials, and duct placements, a chilling blueprint for a prison. Receipts from March 1997 showed rentals of an excavator and bulldozer from a distant county, suggesting Voss avoided local suppliers to stay off the radar. A dusty box in the attic held the most damning evidence. A stack of letters, dozens of them, addressed to E and C. Written in a tight, slanted script, they described a delusional fantasy of a family living underground with Voss as the guardian. The letters spoke of daily routines, meals, lessons, bonding, and a twisted sense of love. I read one of those letters in a case file once, and it made my skin crawl. The way he spoke of those boys like they were his own. Voss was brought to the FBI field office in Lansing, placed in a stark interrogation room. He sat still, his gray eyes unreadable, claiming innocence. "You've got the wrong man," he said, his voice flat. Agents laid out the evidence, the blueprints, the receipts, the letters. They read excerpts aloud, watching his face for cracks. Voss denied everything, insisting the items were planted. But when confronted with the ventilation system's serial numbers traced to his purchase, his composure wavered, his hands twitched, his voice grew sharp. The agents pressed harder, painting a picture of a predator who used the 1997 storm as cover, luring the boys with an offer of shelter. Voss's denials faltered. After hours, he broke. His confession was a monotone horror, delivered like a man reciting a grocery list. On July 17, 1997, Voss saw Ethan and Caleb heading toward their hidden hollow, a spot he'd learned about while servicing a nearby utility station. He'd been watching them for weeks, obsessed with their bond, their innocence. The storm was his chance. Driving his van, he offered them a ride to safety. Trusting him, the boys climbed in. Voss used ether-soaked rags to knock them out, then drove them to the container, prepared months earlier. He'd spent weeks digging the trench with rented equipment, masking the noise amid Blackthorn's natural din. The container was his masterpiece, a soundproof, ventilated prison, hidden beneath layers of earth. Voss admitted to keeping the boys alive for years, bringing food, water, and comic books to keep them happy. He described his attempts to create a family, forcing them into routines of meals and lessons. Ethan, defiant and fierce, resisted constantly, plotting escapes and shielding Caleb. Caleb, quieter, withdrew into his sketches, his notebook a silent rebellion. Voss's letters revealed his obsession with control, his rage at Ethan's defiance. In early 1999, 18 months into their captivity, Ethan broke a ventilation fan in an escape attempt, nearly suffocating them all. Enraged, Voss strangled him, his hands shaking as he described the act. He buried Ethan's body in a remote clearing under a cedar tree, miles from the container. The interrogation turned to Caleb. Voss's story grew shaky. He claimed Caleb escaped in 2001, at age 16, by prying open the hatch during a supply run. Voss said he searched, but found no trace, abandoning the container in fear. The agents didn't buy it. The hatch's triple locks were near impossible to break, especially for a malnourished teenager. They believed Voss killed Caleb too, likely when he became too old or defiant, but refused to admit it. His refusal to reveal Caleb's fate felt like a final act of control, a way to torment the Morrows. But a faint hope lingered. Could Caleb have escaped? The FBI followed Voss's directions to Ethan's burial site. On October 22, 2012, under a towering cedar, they unearthed skeletal remains. Forensic tests confirmed it was Ethan, his skull showing signs of strangulation. Laura and David Morrow were called to the morgue, their faces hollow as they identified a scout badge found with the bones. It was closure, but not enough. Caleb's fate gnawed at them. Voss's claim of escape seemed like a lie, but no body was found. The forest was searched again, but 11 years had erased any trail. Voss's letters hinted at Caleb's growing silence, his spirit broken after Ethan's death. The BAU suggested Voss killed him in a quiet moment, unable to tolerate another rebel. The investigation dug into Voss's past, uncovering a pattern. In the 80s and 90s, he'd worked jobs near schools and camps, always a loner, always too close to boys. No charges ever stuck, but the signs were there. His HVAC expertise and state contracts gave him freedom to roam Blackthorn unnoticed. The container's construction took months, a secret project hidden by his legitimate work. The storm was his perfect alibi, diverting suspicion to a natural disaster. I think about this sometimes, how someone can walk among us, their darkness invisible, planning horrors in plain sight. Voss was charged with Ethan's kidnapping and murder, and Caleb's kidnapping. The evidence, blueprints, receipts, letters, and Ethan's remains was overwhelming. In 2013, Voss pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty, receiving 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. During the trial, he stared blankly, offering no remorse. Laura Morrow faced him in court, her voice breaking as she demanded, "Where's my Caleb?" Voss said nothing, his silence a final wound. The FBI closed the case, concluding Caleb was likely dead, his body hidden in Blackthorn's vastness. The Morrows buried Ethan's remains in a quiet cemetery, a small stone marking his name. Caleb's absence was a ghost, his fate unresolved, but presumed. The container was unearthed, studied, then destroyed, its rusted shell a scar on the forest. Coldwater moved on, But the story lingered, a warning whispered in bars and churches. The Morrows rebuilt their lives, but Laura kept Caleb's notebook, its final note a reminder of the evil they'd never seen coming. Sometimes, I lie awake thinking about Caleb. What if he did escape, only to vanish into a world that didn't know him? But the truth is colder. A monster stole 2 boys, and only one came home. The forest keeps its secrets, but it's the human heart that hides the darkest ones. Well, have you ever heard of a case like this? Comment your thoughts. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.